I've never been a proponent of decriminalizing all drugs. I've never said we should decriminalize heroin and methamphetamine. I've always recognized that as insane. But I did go through a period, I mean, up until recently, where I said that, you know, we probably should just make pot legal or at least decriminalize it. And I had all the standard arguments for it, the cost of enforcement, the fact that pot arguably isn't much more physically dangerous than alcohol, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those arguments you're familiar with, many of which you've probably made yourself. But I've since come to realize, and that for me was a change. I used to be, well, ban all drugs, and I said, oh, well, marijuana, okay, I can see the argument. Now I'm going back to, I think you just got to ban all this stuff. Ban it all. We've seen what happens. We were promised certain results from decriminalizing drugs, whether it's all drugs or just certain drugs, whatever it is. We were promised certain results, and those results simply have not come about. I mean, has the drug abuse problem gotten any better in any city or any state where they've decriminalized any of these drugs?
You serious?
Given that we have assumptions, our drug policy is based on these faulty assumptions. One of the things that I call for in High Price is that we should rethink, reevaluate how we are regulating drugs like methamphetamine, drugs like heroin, drugs like cocaine, and so forth. And the main reason I call for this reevaluation is this. Each year in this country, we arrest 1.5 million people for drug-related violations. More than 80% of them are for simple possession. Now, if our assumptions that these drugs are so dangerous, we have to go after them with such ferocity, are faulty, I think that we could decrease the blemishes that we put on people's records by decriminalizing drugs rather than the approach that we're taking. Now, when you call for decriminalization in this country, you have to provide some education because the country is quite ignorant about drug policy, about drugs in general. Decriminalization is not legalization. Legalization is what we're doing with alcohol. Alcohol, if you're 21 or older, you can purchase alcohol without fear of being prosecuted. You can sell alcohol legally. Decriminalization, you cannot sell drugs. They still remain illegal. Possession also remains illegal, but you can no longer get a criminal record from possessing a drug. Instead, it would be treated like we treat traffic violations. That way, we decrease the likelihood of putting blemishes on people's records and enhance the likelihood that they will be able to get jobs and contribute to society. When we think about the guys who have occupied the White House, President Obama, President Bush, President Clinton, all three of those guys used illegal drugs in their youth. If they would have been caught, they would have gotten felony charges and probably would not have been allowed to make the contributions that they have made to our country. My expertise are the effects of drugs on people, right? And one of the things that happens in this discussion is that experts are very comfortable talking on areas in which they have limited expertise. I'm not one of them, and I have limited expertise in markets. But what I can tell you is why I favor decriminalization rather than legalization. Legalization, for example, would make drugs probably more available. I don't know that's a prediction for some. But what I do know is that legalization will provide the opportunity for people to exaggerate the extent of the harms caused by drugs. I know that for a fact. And because the country is so ignorant about what drugs actually do, I am arguing in High Price that we should decriminalize and then have a corresponding increase in education about these drugs, realistic education. So when I say realistic education, since I've been talking about methamphetamine, Methamphetamine, since it causes people to have increased heart rate, blood pressure, and so forth. Number one killer in the United States is heart disease. If you have cardiac issues, the public health message will be blared. Don't take methamphetamine. Another issue, methamphetamine is outstanding at keeping people awake. Chronic sleep loss associated with cancers, all kinds of cancers, associated with psychiatric illness. The public health message would be, please don't take methamphetamine near bedtime. Get sleep. Those sorts of things. This is realistic education to help people. So that's why my focus has been on decriminalization rather than legalization. I think the country's too ignorant. We haven't had an adult conversation about drugs, and I'm trying to do that with High Price.